Welcome to Raised on D&D podcast. Each month, Raised on D&D brings you inspirational interviews with tips and strategies to enrich your family's gaming experience.
Your host for Raised on D&D has been a game master for 30 years and father to 3 gamers. Here is Nick Cardarelli.
Welcome back, gamers. I'm your host, Nick Cardarelli, and this is Raised on D&D. My next guest is from Novato, California. He's the creator of Family Fantasy RPG, which has released 2 children's 5E RPG games on itch.io and DriveThruRPG. He also created the homebrew World of Salon in collaboration with Wildspire Miniatures. He's also the contributing and founding member of the Turtle Guild, a community collaboration project. He has a brand new mermaid game to be released at the end of the year. Please welcome Dr. Colin Anderson. Hi, Colin.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on the show. We're really excited about Family Fantasy RPG and all the great things that you got coming out. But before we get into that, can you take us back to your first experience with tabletop role-playing games? Kind of let us know where the passion for RPGs really started.
Yeah, for sure. I was introduced in high school, probably my junior year. My best friend, brother-in-law, was Joseph Browning. I'm name dropping because he went on to start Expedition Retreat Press, which put out D&D content for 3.0 and 3.5. He was our dungeon master. And I mean, we started it in junior high. Yeah, junior high started with like 6 of us at a table. And we were not the cool kids by any means, but senior year, by the end of senior year, we had 12 kids around this big pool table playing a game DM'd by Joseph Browning, his home, it was a blast. Yeah. And then ever since then, it's just been a part of life.
That is fantastic. And so fast forwarding, you're a husband and a father. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Fantastic.
Got married in Phoenix in about 5 years ago. And then I have a 4-year-old. Yeah.
Congratulations. Now, your 4-year-old, have you already introduced them to tabletop role-playing games?
We have. We did actually right when he turned 3. That was pretty much the beginning of the pandemic. I had idle hands not being able to go into my work. And I had gotten back into I'd gotten pretty heavy into the D&D scene again with the project with Wildspire. My buddy Ryan runs Wildspire Miniatures. I actually hadn't talked to him in a long time. And he said, hey, I already had 1 Kickstarter. I'm doing my 2nd Kickstarter. I want to add some homebrew content to give my miniatures more sustenance and make something different and new and fun. And so during the pandemic, so I was writing. I was just writing and cranking out quests and NPCs and all this fun stuff. And, because I was into the research and everything, I was looking on D&D Facebook groups and all the Reddit boards and all that. And a question that kept coming up was, how do I introduce my kids to D&D? Like, it just was all over the Facebook forums, right when the pandemic was really getting bad. And I said, okay, well, how would I do it? And so I started making a system, and then it turned into, we played it with my son. My son was the first play tester of my game system. And and that's what has kind of kept it going, because it is, I'm sure too, indie game creator, there's plenty of them out there, right? And it's a competitive field. But his response at 3 years old, his response to me telling a story and then changing my voice and pretending to be one of these characters. And the first pilot prototype of the game had kind of the storybook illustrations that I have in my game. And he saw the picture, and I was, it all kind of clicked, and he was so happy. And I mean, as anyone with playing with children know, it's short-lived and awesome. And then later he was driving an NPC around in a convertible, the game was over and he was just playing and we were on doing other stuff. But since then, man, it really has molded interactions around the house. Because
that's fantastic. Now, mine are a little bit older.
Okay.
I've got a 15-year-old, a 14-year-old, soon to be 13-year-old. But we started gaming tabletop RPGs about the same time that you and your son are playing RPGs. They've been raised up on it. And when we started almost 10 years ago, 11 years ago, there wasn't a lot of children's RPG content out there. So what happened was we had to take 3.5 and some Pathfinder 1E and just kind of water it down and give it to them in little chunks. And then all this children's RPG content started to emerge. And as that came out, we got our hands on it. We started playing it. And so they've been able to sample lots and lots of games. And obviously, as they get older, you get to add some games that they couldn't play when they were in elementary school, like Call of Cthulhu, Vampire the Masquerade, things like that. So we keep doing that. So with your son playing these games during the pandemic, tell us how that helped you guys during the lockdown, and you were writing and now you're creating. How did that help you as a family?
It really, seeing his reaction to that opened us up to, like you say, you really want to find things adjacent to it to keep his interest. And so just games in general, board games, we now have an extensive collection of board games for children. Some educational, some just pure fun, most of them cooperative. And but the biggest thing has been story time. It's just been story time where he's a great storyteller. He is. He's uninhibited. He'll just go off and tell a story. And we know it's from him playing these games early on, where we let him be creative without saying, you can't do that. That's not part of what we're doing here. Instead, you just say, yeah, well, whatever, we're going to do what you want to do. We're going to try to influence it, but the story is yours. And now, even brushing teeth, right? Brushing teeth. For a while, we had a continuing story during teeth brushing that was about his paladin, Catch the Paladin, and his adventures. And he has taken that and expanded it. And now you can just ask him, like, tell us a story about Catch. And he goes, well, it just goes off.
And as a communications major myself, I really appreciate how tabletop role-playing games can help children strengthen those communication skills, whether it's telling a story or interacting with NPCs, all of those things. Mm-hmm. So Colin, tell us a little bit about how Family Fantasy RPG is different from some of the other children's RPGs out there.
Right. And I mean, I think it's an important point, because there are a lot of really amazing systems out there. And I'm sure you get some of them said all the time, Hero Kids, Amazing Tales, the No Thank You Evil. Like there's a lot out there. They're great systems. They're simpler, right? When you think about D&D 5e, when you think about some of these systems aimed towards children, you do simple dice 6 rolls, simple character sheets. What's different about Family Fantasy RPG is we wanted to answer that specific question: is how do I introduce my kids to D&D? Like D&D is the most popular RPG, and there are some people. Yeah, obviously my answer is try different RPGs. Try everything, play everything, because some things for different people are going to stick and some things aren't. But if for some reason that's your choice, say, I know D&D, I want to get my kids into D&D. Family Fantasy RPG is D&D system. It's 5e rule set. So it has the same skills. It has the core abilities. It has some of the terms you'll see similar to the D&D 5e rule set. As far as gameplay goes, what we did, obviously we can't have 4-year-olds playing D&D 5e. We stripped it down for 3 tiers. So the earliest tier, there's no dice and there's no combat. It's a story. It's a choose your own adventure story, pretty much. You have your character. You have a few RP abilities that you can use in the story, and you complete the adventure. And then tier 2, you add in combat option. And it's not either yes or no. It's an option now, a tier 2, just because now you have static numbers, no dice rolling yet. Static numbers, just, your sword does 2 damage, your spell does 3 damage, and still very simple and a few extra skills. And then finally, that highest tier, tier 3, you have a simplified 5e mechanic where it's just based on the advantage disadvantage system. Is such a good system, an easy system to use. If you're good at something, you have advantage. If you're not good at something, you have disadvantage. So based on your core abilities, strength, dex, con, You are proficient. You get to roll two dice, take the better one, or you're not, and you roll 2 dice to take the least one. That's like that's the level below getting into the straight rule set of D&D 5e. And then on top of that, as far as the game system goes, I really think we're different. One, for the storybook illustrations, we want the youngest kids to have that connection. So we want the pictures with the characters and the backgrounds and the bright colors and all of this stuff. We want that in there to connect the dots, to make it easier for the storyteller to get the imagination going. So here's just a picture, here's a quote, and then you do interactions, role playing. You take over control of the characters and you act it out. We have colorable character sheets and puzzles that go along with it. There's a puzzle ability. So if you want to use this ability, it's almost like a ritual where this spell is more powerful, but it takes you time to do it. And that's when you have to do one of these puzzles. And of course, we have them for each of the tiers. And then the short chapters, right? The short chapters where like everyone asks like, okay, but how long can you keep their attention? Well, the chapter breakup lets you like maybe do 1 or 2 chapters in the adventure. And then if the attention is gone, just be done with the adventure for now. Put it away. Go play with the paper miniatures or play something else. But then you can come back and say, here's where we were. Let's keep going.
You brought up some great stuff there. Obviously, smaller game sessions are the best, especially with those younger players. And not only that, when you get those shorter sessions, it kind of gets them excited to do it again, right? And one of the things I think parents sometimes miss the mark on is they'll do a big long session or just try and cram too much in all at once. And what we find is, especially when we're stumbling through with young children, is we find, oh, well, they got bored 20 minutes before we realized it, right? And that's detrimental when you're trying to get them into a new hobby. So definitely a shorter session, and that way they're excited for the next round again. Now, the tier system is really great. So what we got 5e compatible, but you're breaking it down. Now, your son is 4. So did you take him through all 3 tiers yet? Or is he still in tier 1, tier 2? Where's he at?
He's in tier 1 for sure.
Okay.
When we tested the second game, the Dino Riders game, he was close to tier 2. I think that he was more interested in fighting in that one. And so we thought that it was going to be a tier 2 thing. But when it got to the end of it, he took he kind of took the cues towards the non-combat pathway, and it didn't end up going. So, I mean, it was our idea was to do tier 1 and if it came to combat, then we would switch. We'd show him how the like, oh, you attack with your sword, it does this amount of damage. He looks this amount of hurt.
That's great. And so my wife and I are homeschoolers. So we homeschool all 3 children. We've homeschooled them for 10 years. And one of the things that we've discovered in homeschooling is that, having that kind of self-guided by the child, saying, okay, guide them towards the next tier. But like you said, you put the kind of combat situation elements there, and then he went ahead and took the diplomacy story route anyway. So by doing that, you're letting him let you know, I'm ready for tier 2. And that's great. And I think by having a mechanic like these tiers is really going to help families that understand that self-guiding, really help them with their RPGs. Because one of the things that parents talk to me about is they talk to me about violence in RPGs, right? Well, how can my 4-year-old play a violent RPG? RPGs are about killing goblins, decapitating minotaurs, gutting dragons, stealing loot, right? How can I have that with my 6-year-old? Okay. And my recommendation is always the same thing. Look at the media that your children are consuming. If they're watching Dora the Explorer, Paw Patrol, things like that, then the action should be of that type of level. And that kind of lets you know, hey, they're ready for this. If they're watching G.I. Joe and the guy's ship blows up, but he comes out with a parachute, guess what? He's not ready for that explosion to kill all the bad guys, right? And I think with your tier system, you kind of grasp that right away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's mentioned in the rules, because with a game like this, I do put a considerable amount of effort into talking about how to run these games with children, because that's a big part. Even people who know the D&D 5e set might not have the idea, like might not really feel comfortable doing this. And so one thing in the rules I say, when a player character reaches 0 HP, they are basically they're done. They're out of the fight until they get healed. They're not dead. They're not unconscious. They're not bleeding out. They're just done with the fight until they can get healed. Most of the monsters so far, all of the monsters or bosses have been very mystical, magical creatures. So the witch, typical witch end scene, right, melts into the floor. Is she dead? Who knows? But she's gone. The fight is over. She is gone. Boggles, slip into a mud puddle. There's ways to still do it, have the combat, have it be fun. And like you say, Paw Patrol, there's a lot of shows that even wholesome in nature are going to have a little bit of fighting. It might not have death and those very more big kid themes, but fighting is going to be present. He does. He loves superheroes. He loves fighting, superpowers, and all of that stuff.
And that's great. And and the thing is, with action adventure, whether it's fantasy adventure or sci-fi adventure, that sort of thing, one of the elements of the story is conflict, and there has to be some sort of conflict. And that conflict doesn't always have to be beating up the bad guys. And you're absolutely right. I talk to people and they go, "You play D&D with your kids?" And they say, "Well, we did that in college while we were drinking and smoking all kinds of stuff. And, that's not a kid's game. There's sex and there's violence and there's all that. It's like Conan the Barbarian meets Deathstalker meets Beastmaster." And I'm like, whoa. No. Yeah. And the problem is, if you're a gamer of some time, and suddenly you find yourself being a dad of a 5 or 6 year old, and everyone's talking about playing D&D with their kids. Like you mentioned, it's not just how do I make the rules more easily manageable for my child. It may be something as simple as, I don't know how to run this game that me and my army buddies used to play in barracks for a 4-year-old or 5-year-old. And the fact that Fantasy Family RPG does provide you with that information in the game is amazing. You've released 2 titles on itch.io and DriveThruRPG, but you have a new game coming out, and this one is mermaid theme. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so what's really cool is through this process, just a little bit of back knowledge. I did an unsuccessful Kickstarter. When I first got into the field, I had no idea what exposure was and any of that. So I was like, cool, I'm gonna do a Kickstarter. It seems, I thought I had the math done all right, and it wasn't successful. But from it, I learned a lot, and I took the pilot PDF and I put that on DriveThruRPG just to see if I could build interest. And that first one, it's concept arts. It's by an artist out of South America, a kid that I just met through the community. And I was like, hey, I'll commission you. I'm going to pay you money if you help me get these characters. And then once I had the characters, I went to a professional studio to do the city and some of the other background art. So once that came out, I was really happy with that. I had the characters, everything was good. And then I was like, okay, I've had ideas for other themes, and that's the Dino Riders is the second game, to where you have players and now dino companions. So now you add this whole new exciting thing, because my son is very much into dinosaurs. And for the art for that, we went straight to the professional studio. We just put the money down to say, hey, hopefully we're going to use this in the future, keep using this, got the professional art. For this mermaid game, through the community, through the Turtle Guild, I've met an artist, Kaz the DM, and he has, I think it's called Rubber Hose almost. That's his art style. It's very bright. It's very colorful. It's very different than any of my other 2 games. And so the art for this mermaid game, he's doing it. And he's been working on the characters, and they're nothing. I haven't seen anything like them. We've got like the Tide Fighter, the Monk, and the Bard. It's just, to getting inspiration. I'm getting inspiration about the game from the art he's giving me during this process. And so It's just going to be another scenario that, they're going to have abilities now that are, aquatic themed. And the system's still going to be the same. You're going to, with the first PDF I'm putting out, you get the rule book and then how to play, the characters, the miniatures, and an adventure. And then I'm releasing adventures, usually pretty cheap, like the fairy adventure PDF, where it's just a PDF. It's pay what you want on DriveThruRPG or HEO. You can get it free. I encourage people to go and get it to look at what it looks like. And so once the mermaid game is out, then I will be also releasing adventure PDFs similarly. And each new adventure PDF has a new character class just to keep things interesting and keep it going. But yeah, I haven't thought too much about the first adventure. I think it's going to be some sunken ship, lost treasure kind of thing. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm hoping to get that one out in November.
Fantastic. It's still going to be 5e. So what's really great about this is the parents who 5th edition is their go-to game of choice, or for a lot of parents, a lot of folks who listen to Raised on D&D, 5th edition was their first introduction to tabletop role-playing games. Because of that, we've got some newer gamers out there who are trying to play with their families, and that's great. So they'll be able to go into these different worlds that you've set up and be able to do this. So the Turtle Guild has helped you out tremendously with finding this artist for your mermaid game. Tell us a little bit more about that.
It's a group of content creators that met on a community server and got together and said, hey, let's make some content. We put out an adventure. It's free on DriveThruRPG called Gift of the Web. It's a level 10. We have map makers. I was the writer. We have artists. We have item designers, just home brewers in general. And we all got together, made this adventure. It turned out pretty good. We had fun. And since then we were like, okay, let's take the next level. So now we're working on a monster manual and an adventure that's in a complete homebrew world so we can sell it. The first one was fan content, so we just give it out there for free. It's just that's the benefit of it is I get to work with amazing artists. I get to meet amazing artists, and we put something together that's just what a group of people think would be a lot of fun. Yeah, it's been a real positive experience.
That's terrific. And Turtle Guild now, is this a closed group? Are you constantly looking for new content creators? Is it growing? What's the situation there?
Yes, we're always looking for creators. Anyone that wants. We're not trying to make a lot of money. So we're right now we're just inviting everyone in to give ideas and go. But yes, it's a very open community. We're on Twitch and we have a Discord. Those are the two ways to find us.
Terrific. With the new games coming out, the new community that you've built, creating new content, Colin, what kind of advice do you have for old school gamers like me who may be apprehensive about playing with kids at the table, and for those new RPGers who just kind of they're really just getting their sea legs, and they're just getting a handle on this whole 5e thing, and now they're trying to open it up to their whole family? What advice do you have for them?
I'll tackle one thing, the first thing first, by saying that an interesting side effect of this game, I believe, is it's very much a dungeon master trainer. For one of those groups that you described, people that are new into the game, everyone knows going from player to game master is a big transition. And it's not just a transition on experience or expertise or knowledge or how much you read or how much you've played. Sometimes it's a purely question of, I don't know if I feel comfortable being a game master. I want to play for fun. I'd rather be a player. So playing with my son, but also writing down how to tell other people how to play with their children showed me that this is the best way to practice being a DM, playing with your family, playing with your kid. Take the game, run it how you want to run it. And I promise it'll be way easier if you're running it for your family than it would be for running for a group of friends. So if you're getting into the field, you're like, hey, I want to be a DM, you're going to probably feel more pressure that first gaming session that you come with your homebrew world or your module you're going to run for all your group of friends than you would if you're just sitting down with your kid or your family and saying, hey, let's try this out. We don't have anything. We could watch TV for the next hour, or we could try this little scenario out and see how you like it. And I think that's for a lot of people who now are experienced DMs or game masters, it's that first step is pretty much all it takes, right? Once you get past that first step, you realize that one, people aren't going to rouse you if you make a mistake or a misstep as a game master, right? But two, you can do it. It's easy, it's fun, and then once you get hooked on making other people have fun with the story you're telling, then that's the best part. But I do want to kind of sidestep to a point with the 3-tiered system. There's been another interesting side effect, and that is families can play. You can play different tiers at the same time in the same story. And we've had people play test this before, where a 10-year-old is playing tier 3 with their 6-year-old brother, sibling, and they're playing tier 2, and it works. And eventually, as the kids get older, if they have other kids, they can take over the DM spot. They can become the game managers and still play, and they can run the game for their younger children. So we put it in there, like, get the teenage brothers involved, get the grandparents are coming in for a week, give them a character sheet, have them color in a miniature and join the adventure, like that's the benefit. That's what we've tried that once. And again, we had attention for a little bit. The grandparents drew, colored the character sheets, and we got into the story, and 20 minutes in, he wanted to play something else with the grandparents. And that's what, grandparents are in town, he wanted to play with them, but we were close, right? Eventually, I don't doubt that in a couple of years, eventually we can have an event where me, my wife, my son, maybe one of my son's friends or something, their parents all sit down to an RPG together. So.
And that's fantastic. And I know from experience that will happen one day for you. And I'm excited for when it happens for you. Colin, thank you so much for being on the show today. Thank you for all the amazing stuff that you've got coming out, that you've already put out, for your contribution to the gaming community, for helping parents get to the table with their children. We can't thank you enough. We're so excited about what you have coming out.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me. This was a blast. I appreciate it.